It is 4.4, step 3. This is a should do, and it's the poem Late Love. So I'll start by reading it. How they strut about, people in love, how tall they grow, pleased with themselves, their hair glossy, their skin shining. They don't remember who they have been. How filmic they are just for this time, how important they've become, secret, above the order of things, the dreary mundane. Every church bell ringing, a fresh sign. How dull the lot that are not in love, their clothes shabby, their skin lusterless. How clueless they are, hair a mess. How they trudge up and down streets in the rain. Remembering one kiss in a dark alley, a touch in a changing room. If lucky, a lovely wait for the phone to ring. Maybe, baby. The past with its rush of velvet, its secret hush already miles away, dimming now in the late day. So starting with some words that might be tricky. Mundane means dull, ordinary, lusterless, not bright or shiny, dull. So the speaker is talking about really a contrast here between the dull and the exciting, right? And what does that have to do with? Well, let's take a look at the setting and the situation. The main situation of this poem is that the speaker is providing a commentary on the differences between people in love, line 1, which are described in the first 2 stanzas, and the lot that are not in love, in line 9, are described in the last 3 stanzas. Once you figure out that that's the situation of this poem, it becomes a lot easier to manage. So taking time, when you get your poem, eventually in May, when you take the paper 1 exam, you'll want to sit with it for a minute and just read through it a couple of times, just trying to figure out what is the situation of this poem. And getting there to the fact that we've got one group being identified and then another group being identified is, I think, really the first hurdle for this poem. When we look at the specific settings listed, we see that the people who are in love are described as filmic, and so we have sort of a feeling like we're in the movies there, but it's not explicit, it's just an implicit, hinted at setting. We have every church bell ringing in, line 8, makes us feel like we're probably near a church, but again, it's pretty implicit, it's not an explicit setting. We also have in stanza 3, the dull lot that are not in love, their clothes shabby, their skin, they are trudging in streets in the rain. There is a clear setting. Then we move on to the 4th stanza, and we have these memories of settings. Remembering one kiss in a dark alley, a touch in a changing room. So those are 2 specific settings, but they are memories of things that the lot not in love is thinking about. A place where the phone is ringing, maybe. So it's not an explicit, clear setting, but it is a place, a kind of place referenced. And then at the very end, we have the past in line 16 that is in the late day. So there's a reference to setting, a time, the late day, and also place, already miles away. But it's an odd reference to setting because we're talking about the past. And so it's a figurative use of setting because it's the past that's miles away in the late day. But still, it gives us a feeling of place and time, which is what setting is all about. How about characters? We've got two groups, right? And the speaker. And the speaker doesn't say much about herself at all. By the way, people have been asking how I figure out the gender of the speakers. I default to her. That's just how I interpret poetry. So you can use they if you'd like, if the gender is not clear, or you could default to he, or you could default to she. He, she, saying the two back to back is kind of gone out of fashion. Okay, so I'm saying she when I can't tell the gender. All right, so we've got the speaker. We don't know a lot about her. People in love are the first group, and we know they're attractive in stanza 1. They're pleased, and they don't remember the past. In stanza 2, they're temporarily filmic. They seem like they should be on camera, at least for now, right? They're above the ordinary, and they're always seeing signs in things. If a church bell rings, oh, that must mean something. It's a sign, right? And then there's the second group, the lot that are not in love in the last 3 stanzas. They are not attractive. They're clueless. They're without direction. They remember things like a kiss or a dark alley or a touch in a changing room, and they maybe their best hope is that they might be waiting for a phone to ring, right? And then in stanza 5, we've got that one line stanza that continues from stanza 4. In the late day, the past is now dimming and is far away. I don't know why I even mentioned it there. It doesn't really have, I guess, those last 2 lines, I guess, are about the lot in love, about the lot that are not in love. But it doesn't explicitly say so, so maybe it is ambiguous. It has more than one possible meaning. Then we've got action. The people in love strut, grow tall, they shine, they have become important, they're above everything. The lot that are not are dull, clueless, trudging, remembering a kiss, a touch, waiting for a phone ring. And then the past is the last thing that is described as having an action. The past is dimming now. All right, so once we've dealt with S, C, and A, the first S, C, and A, we're really done with the literal understanding of the poem. We have a literal understanding, and we could make some comments now about how it's organized. And that's really what we're looking at when we look at form and structure. We're looking at organization first from that outside point of view, which is the silhouette, the form, and then digging in deep and like an x-ray and looking at how it all works. And that's the structure. So what kinds of things could we look at? Well, if we're looking at form, we're going to probably say that we have 5 stanzas, and the most interesting aspect has got to be that last stanza, right? The last stanza, stanza 5, is much different than the other stanzas, and so that is worth noticing. And once you notice it, you can make an evaluative claim about it. First, you make your literal, undebatable claim, and say that the 5th stanza is only 1 line long, and so it's 3 lines shorter than the rest of the stanzas in the poem, making it stand out, or whatever evaluative comment you want to make. It is isolated, you could talk about it that way, and because of its isolation, it stands out. And then you'd have to start thinking about, well, why this line? Why would this line stand out? Why doesn't it fit in the end of stanza 4? Why add this additional line? What is the effect that it creates? And so you have to take a stab at that. Give it a shot. What do you think? Something else about form that you'd want to mention is that is probably the line lengths are similar, with maybe a couple that are longer. I'm looking at like maybe line 6 and 11. We don't have a super short line with longer lines. They're pretty similar if you count the syllables. They're about 10 lines or 10 syllables long. Most of them are exactly 9, and then a couple are longer, and I don't think there are any under 9 syllables. There are some rhymes. Did you catch the rhymes? The rhymes are internal, I think mostly. You could talk about those, look at those, see what pattern those create. And then once you move to structure, I think you're going to start looking at things like the repetition of the beginning of the stanzas. We have how they strut about people in love in the first line of the second stanza, how filmic they are just for this time. So it repeats the sentence structure beginning with how. And then we have that transition in stanza 3 to the lot that are not in love. How dull, it begins the same way. But then we have a change in stanza 4. This is the first stanza that doesn't begin with how. And this is where the structure really changes, and we can start putting some of these things together. The fact that this last stanza is just one line, and now the fact that stanza 4 doesn't begin with how. It's almost as if the form and structure have broken down by stanza 4 and stanza 5. They're no longer ending just the way that they should. And then if you take that further, maybe you could say that that's the case for the end of stanza 3 as well, because at the end of stanza 1, we have a period, and that stanza ends in just one sentence. And then in stanza 2, same deal, period. We have 2 periods in that one, but they fit into stanza 2. And then if you look at stanza 3, then you start noticing, oh, wait a minute, now that stanza doesn't even end with a sentence. It keeps going. It has a sentence that ends in line 9, but then lines 10, 11, 12 don't end. They continue. Could it be that the content is mirroring the form and structure here? Why would it be that once we start talking about the lot not in love, it doesn't look right? Ooh, we're getting to something interesting. Perhaps the structure and form reflect the idea that the lot not in love isn't perfect, right? Isn't regular. All right, so those are some tips of how to deal with this poem. Have fun with it. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.